Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 1 and 2 discussion today. I want to talk about the topic of weekend stash tab sales because grinding gear games are running one at the time I'm recording this video, and knowing that most of my views come in the first 48 hours after I post a video, chances are it's still going at the time that you're seeing this. Now, these stash tab sales are not a once ever type event. These typically get run once every 3 weeks. They usually run them on the first weekend after a major release, also the 4th, 7th, and 10th. I'm not promising they're going to continue to that exact release cadence. Who knows, maybe they'll shake things up a bit with Path of Exile 2, but that's been their long-term history. The other thing you need to know about these sales is that grinding gear games are never marked down the real-world money costs of the supporter packs they sell. Instead, the points that are included in those supporter packs, they'll go further because you'll need to expend less of them in order to get whatever it is that's on sale. And their stash tab sales work no differently. The final thing to know about them is that if something's 20% off this sale, it'll be 20% off the next one, it'll be 20% off of the next one. They're pretty consistent with that. It's not like there'll be times that they have massive markdowns on particular things. Instead, when it's on sale, it'll usually come down to the same price. And that's especially the case with stash tabs. If you're primarily a Path of Exile 1 player, I have put up a video in the past that I actually still think, even though it's quite old now, it still stands the test of time pretty well on what you should buy. Path of Exile 1, there's a lot more to go through than Path of Exile 2 when it comes to stash tabs. So I'm going to put a link to that video in the bottom left of the screen in the last 20 seconds of this video. That's what I would recommend checking out. The only thing that's changed since then is that in Path of Exile 1, the Fragment tab is now much more important than it was when I recorded that video. In fact, I'd go as far as to say now that the Path of Exile 1 Fragment tab is a must purchase for that game. It doesn't currently exist in Path of Exile 2, so it has no benefit here. Also, if you play both Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2, let your Path of Exile 1 stash tab demands dominate, because stash tabs are simply more important in Path of Exile 1 than they are in 2. Okay, so what about Path of Exile 2? Well, here, the thing is I'm going to tell you, you just simply don't need as much stash tab space as you do in POE 1. POE 2 does not drop the ridiculous amounts of items that Path of Exile 1 did, and as a result, you're going to find there's a lot less that you need to keep long term. There will still be things you want to keep long term, including rare items that might not have been worth keeping long term in POE 1, but there's not going to be the same overwhelming numbers of them, and there's also not the same 10,000 different types of currency. I'm exaggerating a bit there, but there are a lot of different items that have some sort of item modifying effect in Path of Exile 1. In Path of Exile 2, those things are much more manageable. Now I want to demonstrate some of the special types of stash tabs that exist in Path of Exile 2 and what you might be interested in using them for. This here is a premium tab. Now the primary function of premium tabs, they store the same 12 by 12 amount of items that you can get into a regular tab, but when you right click them, you can then set a price on everything in them. So for instance, you can see here that I'm listing all of these on the trade site at 1 Exalted Orb each. It is technically possible to list items for trade without any premium tabs, but it requires third-party software and it is a complete mess. So I'm going to say that having at least one of them is going to feel nearly essential. Now, something you can do as well with any type of tab, whether it be a premium tab, whether it be a standard tab, or whether it be one of the special tabs, is that you can set a particular affinity for it. What this means is if you set this to, say, be your Delirium affinity tab, any item that is considered to be a Delirium item by the game, if you control click it in your inventory, it will come into this tab if there is space for it at all. To demonstrate this, I pulled out a number of uncut skill gems, which are considered to be gems here. I am going to control click these, and you'll notice they're not going into the left-hand side of the screen. That's because they're instead going down to my gem tab, which has the affinity for gems set up on it. You can see whether a tab's got an affinity or not by having a look here for this icon. And then if you right click it, you can see what affinities apply. You'll notice that you do not need to be a special tab to do this. So here you can see this essence I'm just going to then control click it, and you'll see that it went into this tab that's named essence. This is not an essence tab, this is a standard premium tab. My actual essence tab isn't being used. That's because the essence tab in Path of Exile 2 is pretty mediocre. We'll get to that when we go through all the special types of tabs. The other tab that's really general is the quad tab. The quad tab is just a premium tab, but 4 times the size, so it's double the size in each direction. These are probably the most popular way to store items, and especially if you're listing items for sale, but it is not universal. There are definitely people who find that having 4 of the regular tabs ends up being the superior choice. Ultimately, I'm going to leave that up to you. So the one special tab that you probably want to get in Path of Exile 2 is the currency tab. This is just a really useful way to store your currency. Notice that it doesn't really store more items than you can fit into a regular tab. It's just simply that it's got a better layout. In Path of Exile 1, it's much more common to have 5,000 of a particular type of currency. In Path of Exile 2, we're not really at that point yet. We'll see where we get over time, but I don't think we're going to see that many people that have got, say, 5,000 Exalted Orbs for a little while. Of course, Path of Exile player base will definitely prove me wrong on that. And let's go through the other ones. Firstly, the Flask tab. I think it's so mediocre that I haven't even bought it. I just don't really see much use for it. Maybe in Path of Exile 1, it's a little bit better, but in POE 2, I think it's really, really marginal. There's nothing you can't do better than the Flask tab just by using a single standard tab. And if you want to have all of your flasks go in one place, you can always set an affinity onto a standard tab for it. So I don't own the Flask tab at all. The Essence tab, as I mentioned already, I think this is really mediocre. It simply doesn't hold that many different categories of items, and as a result, everything you could fit in here could also fit into one of the smaller tabs, and the layout isn't that important either. Delirium tab has the same faults as the Essence tab. It doesn't hold that many different items, and as a result, I'm just not sold on it being a particularly useful thing. The Unique tab is another one that I would not recommend to most players, but at least here I can say, for some people, yes, you do want this. The Unique tab allows you to store up to one copy of each unique in the game, and as a result, it can be useful if you're someone that's interested in collecting unique items. In that situation, yes, I would recommend that you consider the Unique tab, but for other people, I think it's something that is pretty easily missed. And really, that's about it. There's not very many different types of stash tabs in Path of Exile 2 at the moment, and none of them are super essential. So if you're looking for advice from me, if you're solely a Path of Exile 2 player, zero interest in Path of Exile 1, then buy yourself a currency tab, and then using the rest of your points, buy as many premium tabs as you want, and or as many quad tabs as you want, in order to, one, spend the points that you might otherwise not have anything to spend on, and two, just to store items that you're interested in and to be able to conveniently list them on the trade site. I do not recommend any of the other stash tabs for the moment. However, I do think in the future they will add a couple of additional ones. They've already indicated that there's going to be divination cards coming from Path of Exile 1 to Path of Exile 2. The div card tab might at that point become worthwhile, although that's going to be an open question whether it's the case or not. And the other thing that's worth keeping an eye out for is that in Path of Exile 1, there is the map stash tab. There is no equivalent for waystones in Path of Exile 2 at the moment. If this changes, if they add a waystone tab, then that's probably going to be something that most players who reach endgame are going to want to have. It certainly is one of the most important in Path of Exile 1. Anyways, that's basically it. It's pretty easy to be able to say you don't need much here. May your Val Orbs have interesting results, and may you store them in sensible locations.